strategize together. Let's hear it from an expert. Join the conversation, it's informative and free. You and me, let's talk some strategy. Now here's your host, Dorien Morin-van.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dorien Morin-van, and we're live with another episode of Strategy Talks. We are going to talk and geek out on data today. So stay tuned. I will introduce you to my guests in just a minute. But before we do, I want to do a shout out to those of you who are here live and those of you who might be watching this on the replay on Twitter or YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn. Make sure you put hashtag replay in the comments. We'd love to know that you are here. Last but not least, we want to do a shout out to those of you who listen to Strategy Talks as a podcast. We welcome you here as well. And before I introduce you to my guest, a quick shout out to our sponsor, as always, Social Insider. They are the intuitive dashboard for social media analytics, reporting, and competitors analysis for brands and agencies. If you need data, you need Social Insider. So without much further time spent on anything else, I want to introduce you to my guest, Rachel Chapman, who's joining us from the UK. Rachel, where are you exactly located?
I'm in a place called Milton Keynes, which is about 50 miles north of London.
Okay, awesome. So you and I met online and we have the same label, Agile Marketer. So, but we're not going to talk about Agile per se. We're going to talk about marketing data. So Rachel, let me just tell everybody why you are so good at what you do. Rachel Chapman is a marketing consultant specializing in making marketing departments more effective, efficient, and adaptable. She does this through helping companies to be more agile, optimizing organizational design, and developing measurement frameworks. So if you want a marketer who's now a consultant rather than a consultant who knows a bit about marketing, that's Rachel. So we were talking in the green room, and you're really a strategist. So I love that. We're on Strategy Talks. So let's start with that. Geeking out on marketing data. As a strategist, what excites you about data? I'm just going to throw a question at you that I didn't give you ahead of time.
Wow, what excites me about data. I mean, I love really understanding the value that marketing can bring. You know, that's what really gets me going. It's really thinking about what value is marketing added to the business. And without data, you can't measure that, right? You know, you need the data to help you understand. So if I'm in front of the CEO or if I'm a bit more junior in front of the CMO, I want to use data to prove how amazing the marketing is that I've just delivered in terms of the value add to the customer and the business. That's what really gets me going about data.
That's awesome because, you know, if you're watching this, guys, we know often that you're told you need to do marketing. You know that your business is not going to really grow without marketing. But once you start marketing, we don't always know how to measure, what to measure, where to measure, right? So the next question to you then is, what do you consider to be some of the most important marketing metrics to measure, and why? Why would they be the most important? And you know, we can either go basic or you can dive in and go deep. Either one. I'm good with either one.
Okay. Well, I'm going to hopefully not be too much of a politician and say, in order to answer that question, I feel we need to maybe have answered another one first, which is, what are the outcomes we are looking for from our marketing? So this isn't, you know, delivering a campaign or building a website. This is, what's the outcome focused strategic objective that we're trying to hit as a business? And this is shared with marketing and the business ideally. So for example, taking a really, really simple example, let's say one of the business goals is to increase the sales of a certain product online from X to Y, so by 20% by the end of the year, let's say. So that's a really, really simple strategic objective. So clearly marketing have a role to play in that. No, it's not the only role. but marketing are going to help increase the number of sales of a certain product online. So what might the lead indicators be then to determine from a marketing perspective if we're going to hit that number? Because it's no good, starting now and then not knowing till the end of the year if we're on track. So maybe the marketing metric might be, well, we probably need to increase visits to the product page on the website. And if we're going to increase sales by 20%, we might need to increase product page visits by 100% because not everybody's going to buy. So that might be an important metric. We might need to increase conversion rates from a landing page that the marketing drives people to, from the landing page to the product page. We might need to increase click-through rates on emails in order to get more people from the email to the landing page to the product page to then buy something. So in those examples, in that particular example, the important measures are click-through rates, conversion rates, product page visits, and of course, product sales, because ultimately that's the strategic objective. So I think for me, the most important thing about marketing metrics is first having a clear strategic objective and then understanding the drivers that are going to help companies, help marketing teams to deliver on that objective. And then that's what you measure.
All right. That's great. I have a follow-up question, and I think this is really going to help people focus. So I work with mainly small teams. So there might be in-house marketing, sometimes they're, an outside source team, freelance team. So we sometimes have a salesperson. We don't always have a salesperson. We've got a CEO who's in the marketing meeting. Maybe the CEO is the only one that I'm working with. Who owns that piece, right? Because we're talking marketing, we're not talking sales, but I hear you say the conversion rate, the click-through rate, the product sales. Who works together? What are some of or who ideally would you need? You're a consultant, so who's actually putting that? I guess the question is, who's putting that into practice? Who would you need to put all those pieces of the puzzle, which I love the way you laid it out. I always start with marketing goals as well and objectives. So who do you really need? If you're a CEO and you're listening to Rachel Chapman going, oh my God, that makes so much sense. And I want my product, I want more sales. Who would they look to help implement something like this?
Yeah, great question. So thinking of a fairly small business then is probably almost in some ways easier in a larger business. So in a small business, I would say the CEO and his or her management team are absolutely responsible for setting those strategic objectives. So let's say you have a CEO and maybe somebody who does marketing and sales and maybe finance, for example, and maybe somebody else, I don't know, operations or something. I would say they are responsible jointly for setting those objectives. Maybe the finance guy starts because he or she says, this is what we need to achieve as a business in order to hit our targets.
Sure.
And then sales and marketing and ops go, okay, if we need to hit this revenue number, then we need to work together in order to get this many new customers or retain this many customers. So I'd say they are absolutely responsible for the first bit, setting the strategic objectives. Then, however big or small a company's marketing team is, ultimately, it's really, really important these days that either you have somebody in the marketing team who understands data and can analyze data. There's so much data around now, and it's so critical to really understand the impact of marketing activities with shrinking budgets and so on, that somebody in the marketing team really needs to understand it. The only other option really is if you use agencies, and you can always get your agencies to do this kind of analysis for you as well. But that's often a bit like teachers marking their own homework. So it's really better to have somebody in-house.
I love that. That's a really great analogy because we can absolutely 100%, if you're working with an agency and you're looking for data, that unless you're in charge of it and see all of it, they can skew a report.
Yeah.
any way
So
you want them
I'd
to.
say, so to try and answer your question, I'd say it sits somewhere between probably sort of marketing and finance. And ideally, you'll have someone in the marketing team who really understands data, who can do the analysis, who gets Google Analytics, who understands customer research if you've got like tracking studies and that kind of thing. You know, who's a data geek, basically.
Right.
You need that person.
Yeah, I love that you brought that word right back in here. We're geeking out on data. So, with so much data available, Rachel, how do we determine what data points are most relevant to measure and track? You talked about click-through rates, conversion rates, but what if you don't have a product to sell? What if it's a service? How do we, is there anything else at that point we can track?
Sure. So there's a great framework that actually I think Google invented. It's really, really simple. And I love it because it's simple. It's called See, Think, Do, Care, which is another way of effectively saying you, as any kind of business, probably you need to do these 4 things. You need customers to see your marketing, which is you need to build awareness. You then need customers to think about you. So you're influencing consideration, whether they're going to consider your brand. You then need customers to do something to drive action. And whether that's buying a product or buying your service or paying you for a service, that's still them doing something. And then you want your customers to care about you. So that's about growing loyalty amongst your customer base, customer retention. And it doesn't matter if it's a product or a service. Those 4 things are the same for any company. See, think, do, care. They're kind of the classic sales funnel, right? With the
Right.
care.
Yeah.
And each one of those has its own metrics. And I'd really recommend for any marketing team thinking about any piece of marketing you're doing. Which of those buckets does it fall into? Are you trying to raise awareness? Are you trying to influence consideration? Are you trying to get somebody to do something? Or are you trying to retain your customers? And so then the kind of metrics you'd have under building awareness might be ad recall, reach of your marketing, possibly video views, view-through rates, that kind of thing. Consideration, then you're starting to get into the click-through rates, product page traffic, perhaps. If you've got any kind of brand tracking, then how favorable do people view your brand? Then the do stuff is really straightforward, you know, that's app downloads, buying stuff, buying your service, revenue, new customers. And then care might be customer satisfaction, cross sales, net promoter score, customer lifetime value, purchase frequency, those kinds of things. And I think if you put it in those 4 buckets, it helps to lay it all out because there's so much data out there. It helps you to really think about what am I trying to do with this piece of marketing, and what are the options for all the metrics I might want to use in order to work out, you know, which is the right one to pick.
Right. So I love this. And this is something that you should also, if you're watching this and listening to this, you can also use these 4 steps to when you're creating your content, right? It's not just about grabbing the data, but, you know, have all these points. As Rachel said, it's a funnel. So think about where you are in the funnel, what you're trying the audience to do, what you're trying to get them to do. So that's really, really helpful, Rachel. So now, approaching and analyzing that marketing data that we get, right? How do they inform strategic decisions? Because I heard you say earlier, and we're agile marketers, that means we adjust, right? We have to respond to change. So say you set this goal, it's January 1st, and you have this goal for the year, or many goals and objectives. And as you go along, you're not getting the 20% product increase. You're not getting the 100% conversion or the, you know, conversion rate. All those things aren't happening. How does that, where do you start? Like, obviously you see this, red light goes off. What do? Do you alert the team? Do you change tactics? How would you adjust for change as you need?
Yeah, no, great question. And there's all sorts of stuff in there that is relevant to agile marketing, and I won't stray too far from the topic by getting too far into agile, but some of the agile principles really lend themselves to what ideally you do here. I think the first ideal thing, and I know if you're in a small company, this may or may not be possible, but really the best people to bring the data and answer that question are the people who are actually doing the marketing themselves. So rather than me as a marketing leader kind of trying to interpret the data somewhere, I really want the people who are doing the marketing to bring the metrics to me and say, look, this is what the data's showing us. This is the test we did. This is working and this isn't working, and here's what we think we should do, because they're closest to the customer, they're closest to the marketing material, they're closest to the data. Hopefully they know what they're doing. And I want to bring in a great phrase here that I first heard from the wonderful Jim Ewell, who's a grandfather of agile marketing. I always try to make sure I don't bring any hippos into the room, and the hippo is the highest paid person's opinion. So no hippos. We don't have any hippos. And it's quite difficult, especially for leaders like me who've been in marketing a long, long time. You know, historically, our job was to tell people what to do, right? You know, that was what leaders did. Hey, we're the boss and we tell you what to do. Absolutely not. No. I'm not telling people what to do. I'm telling them what outcome I want. And I'm asking them the right questions, hopefully, and giving them the support they need. They know better than me what to do. So to sort of try and answer your question, I suppose what I'd really try and make sure in terms of analysing and interpreting marketing data to inform is the people who are closest to the data and the work, have a look at it. I give them the support they need to make sure that they feel they can come and say, hey, this isn't working. You know, this thing we tried, it's not working. Great. What are we going to learn from it? Let's try something different, rather than bashing people over the head and say, well, that was a waste of time, wasn't it? You know, it's about having an open mind to test and learn fast, fail quick, learn fast, you know, be ready to pivot. Don't keep throwing money away when you've learned that, when the data is telling you that something's not working. Test and adapt.
Yeah. And that's so agile. I love that. And that's, if you're watching this or listening to this, that's the agile mindset, being able to make quick changes. And, you know, you talked about the hippo in the room, but it's also, we also talk about that in sense of, you know, having somebody in the room who, you know, isn't necessarily doing, like, giving you permission to fail, right? In Agile, we want to test a lot of different things. So I heard you say, like, you know, we got to test, what did you say? Try a lot of things and fail fast. What was it? What did you say?
Fail fast, learn quick.
Yeah, fail fast, learn quick. And then you talked about, you know, what can we learn from this? And that's what's called a retrospective, which I love, which is another agile kind of, I guess, a practice that we use in agile marketing. So you don't just say this worked and this didn't, but what did we learn and how are we going to do it different next time? So I love that. And I love that that comes up when we talk about marketing data. That makes a lot of sense, right? So Rachel, what advice would you give to marketers and business owners that might be watching or listening who are just starting to incorporate data into their decision-making process? Because I work with them all the time. There are CEOs out there, business owners, coaches, entrepreneurs, small teams who are doing all the things. They're putting out products. They're trying to market. They're doing all of the things, but they don't know how to measure, or they haven't started this process. They haven't started geeking out on this marketing data. How can they get started? What are some of the things they need to do, or what do they need to put in place, or who do they need to talk to? Because we know, I know that once they start doing this, things will start turning around for them if they're not going right, or they can improve and do even better if they're already doing great.
Yeah, no, and if anybody out there is in that position, well, I guess the first thing I'd say is, actually, if I think I hopefully got three tips for you. The first one, I think, is think big but start small. So don't wait until you think you've got all the right data in place. You know, yes, you think big, think, yes, great, I want this amazing data and reporting structure, but just start small. So have a vision of where you want to get to, but start with what you've got. You know, if you've got data that helps you understand, you know, website visits, or you can do a bit of stuff, or you can take you watch a YouTube video on Google Analytics, you know, just start with what you've got and build from there. Don't try and wait till everything's perfect, which is another agile principle about, you know, just start, try it, build from there. So that's the first thing. I mean, you know, I know everybody should know this, but whatever you want to learn, you can find it on YouTube or Google or something. Just search YouTube on marketing metrics, or how to work Google Analytics, and it's there. It's these things now are quite user friendly. They're not difficult. So that's the first one. The second one is just make sure you have some clear short-term outcomes that ladder up to long-term goals. Most companies are really good at annual objectives. The vast majority of companies are pretty clear. This is what we need to hit this year. We need to achieve this by the end of the year. We need to grow the business by this much or whatever. But the key differentiator for businesses that are successful at this kind of stuff is they also have short-term metrics and outcomes. So there's a framework called objectives and key results. So your objectives are your long-term goals, your key results are your short-term indicators that you're on track. So if you're trying, so in the example I started with, if you know that you want to grow product sales by 20% this year, then set something small that will tell you if that's on track for the next, say, 3 months. Okay, so we need to increase visits to the product page by 100% in the next 3 months. Just think about what those lead indicators are and track them religiously, which leads me to my third tip, really, which is just, doesn't have to be complicated, but build a simple reporting structure that starts to get into the DNA of the business. So every week or every month, it's somebody's responsibility to update this report, which tells you where are you at against your key results that you've set. And decide, well, which meeting is that coming to? Do we have a weekly reporting meeting or a monthly strategy committee or whatever you've got? Just build in a little bit of governance. Doesn't have to be complicated, like so-and-so is responsible for producing this report every week or every month with our key results in. It's going to come to this meeting and we're going to make these decisions on it, these kinds of decisions. Doesn't have to be complicated, but just start there would be my top 3 tips.
That is fantastic. Those are really, really helpful tips. So I'm going to throw a question in there, which, that comes to mind when you're talking about, every week and you're putting the data in there or once a month. There are companies out there, agencies, marketers like you and me, that like to produce content 3 months out, 4 months out, 5 months out. When you see a report and you see things aren't working week to week to week and you need a pivot, how does that work together with being that far in advance? What do you suggest? I mean, do you say, well, produce the images or produce the copy, but not all of it, or adjust, or how does that work? Because that's what I struggle with. And I understand the principle of agile. I understand the mindset, but I'm also working with people who like to see content 2 or 3 months out. I'm working into July and August on some content, but I don't know what's happening right now. I don't know if the May and June content is going to work and if I might have to change. So how could somebody, because I think this is a real problem that we struggle with as marketers. How do we do that? How do we set that up? How do we set ourselves up to do well, knowing that when we see the data, we might have to adjust?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a kind of ideal world answer, which we know we don't live in an ideal world.
No.
But I guess the ideal world answer is to it's a nice phrase. Most people have heard of minimum viable product, which is about getting a product out there that's the minimum thing that customers would want. But I like to think about minimum viable planning. So yes, we have to plan. Of course we do. Things take time. It's important we know what's happening. But how can we make it the minimum viable plan? And those 2 words are important. So can I, instead of actually writing the content for July, can I produce a plan which has an outline, which doesn't take me too long to do, and then only write the detail much nearer the time when I know that actually this is the right thing to do? So it's not that I have no idea what I'm doing in July. I know that I'm planning to produce these 4 pieces of content, and they'll probably have this topic area, and I'll probably use this image. But try and do the minimum viable planning, so that if you get to May and you suddenly find out something's changed, you haven't wasted all that time doing lots and lots of detail and really finishing it. I know that can be tricky.
No, I like the answer, and I love that minimal viable planning. I love that because, in our industry, let's just put it out there, in the last 3 months, everything I'm reading is about AI, right? I mean, marketers galore, chat GPT, everybody's talking about it. And if your theme for April was renewal, but everybody's talking about AI, you might want to adjust what you say or how you say it. You might still have produced the same piece of content, but you might need to add a piece of content or, set up an interview with somebody to talk about AI or whatever. So that's kind of where I was going. I love that minimal viable planning. So you have an idea about what you want to do, but if the data tells you to pivot, or the data tells you, hey, you're putting all this effort into both videos and blogs, but the videos are killing it and the blogs are really not producing as much, right? Then you do more of what works and less of what doesn't, correct?
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. And it's, again, start with small steps. If that's too scary, well, maybe just try it with a couple of things. Don't try it with everything, and see how you go and see if it works. And then, then hopefully if it works, the people doing it should become much more efficient because they're not spending time producing things that don't ever see the light of day. So therefore, give them more time to do better stuff, but closer to the time of publishing.
If you're a marketer and you're watching this or listening to this, we've wasted time on producing something that a stakeholder or an agency owner or an owner of a company, a CEO, asked you to create. And then when you showed it, they're like, that's not what I wanted, right? That's happened before. And so this minimal viable planning will kind of prevent that, where you have that idea, but that when you get close to it, you can actually produce the exact content that they want. So I'm going to close out with one question. Do you have any tips for effectively communicating data insight to non-technical stakeholders? Because that's a big issue. Like, they just want to know, is it working or not? What do they need, and how can we present something? How can we give them a report? Should we? I'm a big, and I'm going to throw this out, I'm a big proponent of not setting them a report. I'm a big proponent of getting them into a meeting and then sharing the report and going through it with them. What has your experience been?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. And I think to take that thought to the next level, and some of this stuff is like really obvious and practical, so I'm sorry if it's a bit obvious, but talk in their language, don't use marketing jargon. So the CEO doesn't care about reach and impressions. It's like, well, what's that? But what they might care about is how many of our target markets have seen our advertising. Well, it's the same thing, but it's just not marketing jargon. So talk in their language and really think about what they care about. The head of the sales or the finance guy, again, doesn't care about, how wonderful our creative looks. They care about how many products has our marketing sold. So try and couch it in that language. And then just a couple of really practical things I learned from one of my amazing bosses, who was called Alberto, who used to work for McKinsey when I was at Santander. He worked at McKinsey before. He just talks about making the report easy. So, some people don't like this, but I think it works. If you're using PowerPoint, use the slide title to explain the key point of the slide. So, for example, the slide title might be, click-through rates on our emails have increased by 20% this month. That's your slide title. So that makes it easy for them to know what the point is you're trying to make. And then they can look at the charts to see if it backs up what you're saying. So, and that was something I've done in quite a few companies, and I think it helps. And then finally, there's an incredible book that I love called Say It With Charts that this guy Alberto introduced me to. It's by a guy called Gene Zelazny, but if you search for Say It With Charts, and he just taught me so much. Like, if you're showing a trend chart, you use a vertical bar chart because that people think that's over time. If you're comparing things, you want to use a horizontal bar chart because then you can easily see the lines going across and you compare them. Only use a pie chart if you're showing the percentage of something relative to the whole. It's a great book. It's dead simple, but it transformed the way I developed charts to show data just by using the right one, making the axes clear, making the title clear. It might seem like boring, but it's geeky. But I love it.
I love it. What a great end to this. I'm going to go order that book. I need that. That is awesome. That is, if you're a marketer and you struggle with this marketing data and how to present it to your clients, this is going to be a great help, because I know that some of you who are watching are marketers, and sometimes we need to have the data to sell our products, right? That's another, of course, we want to get the data to our stakeholders, right? And saying this is what we're marketing, but sometimes we need data to convince somebody to sell a service or a product to, right? So understanding data and how to present it is really great. Rachel, you have been fantastic. How can people connect with you, and where should they connect with you if they want to?
Yeah, so come and find me on LinkedIn is the best place. So if you just search for Rachel Chapman, you'll find me. I think my LinkedIn handle is Rach Chapman on LinkedIn, and I'd love to talk to you. I do have a website as well, which my company is called RBC Future Focus. It's my initials, RBC futurefocus.co.uk, because I'm in the UK. So come onto my website. There's a contact us page, and you can get to me through there as well.
That's awesome. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, the link will be in the show notes. So don't worry about that. We'll get that in there. And Rachel, you have been fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I want to thank everybody who was here live, saying that this is great. These were great nuggets. Rachel, thank you. I think you really helped us geek out on marketing data. I really appreciate you. I will be back next week with another episode of Strategy Talks. Bye, everybody.